Yes, thank you, Amanda. And yeah, I tend to make things a little difficult to have people follow me in general. So um, thank you for trying to understand where I am, because some people did not manage to do that. So thank you, everyone. I'm still in the process of sharing the screen. I think that should be good. And well, welcome. I'm very excited actually to be there. This is my first Cake Fest, so I'm also a little bit nervous, but I decided to have some help, and we have someone that's actually an old timer, I guess, here. That's going to be accompanying me for this whole session. We have half an hour to cover a very important subject, which is plugin compatibility checker. Which is, given the pace of evolution of Cake, a classic problem that every one of us have, just making sure that we can keep up with the evolutions and how to automate the compatibility, how to automate the checks we have of the code. So this is what we're going to tackle today. And basically, I could end up with a tool and telling you exactly what you have on this single slide, which is a list of Cake versions and a list of checks saying, okay, it's good, and then we can move on. So that would be probably the end of this presentation, and you could just go and download the tool. So I thought it could be a little more interesting to understand where this problem of automated compatibility checking comes from, the different challenges, and there are multiple of them that I had to face, and then introduce you the PDFF format, a file that describes actually Cake PHP in many details, and then see what we can do with the plugin checker itself and the kind of results we can expect. So that's going to be a world trip under the hood, and hopefully that's going to be interesting for all of you. So as I said, I am, well, thank you for the introduction, Amanda. I have this guy coming because I'm actually known for starting this craze. If for some reason you have an urge of collecting strange plush toys, then this is, you can blame me, because this is how me who started that. For example, this is the first elephant ever. So at some point in Earth, there was just this one. Now there's lots of them, and hopefully I'll get the next one. Apparently there's some of them coming up. I'm also known for working every day on a static analysis tool called Exacat. Probably more used to PHP Stan. I think that's the one being used on Cake. But there are multiple of a static analysis tool, and this is exactly the experience I'm drawing on to actually tell you about doing the plugin compatibility check. So where do we start when we want to do a plugin checker? And we have to make a first consideration, which is that the usual description we have of software and dependencies are pretty short. Usually when you start a new project with Cake, well, you just call Composer, because well, Composer is always installed, and then you request Cake, and then the version. Hopefully you're starting with a recent one. Maybe you're feeling a little bit adventurous and starting with the number 5, but at least you start with that, and just an identifier and a version number, and that's it. You're good to go. Of course, you know how Cake works. Probably going to check the documentation once or twice, but that's fine. That's all you need. Until, of course, you realize that things are changing and evolving all around you. And then you need a little bit more. The other one that needs more than just a PHP name and a component name is, of course, static analysis tool, because it's obvious which classes we want to use as a controller, for example, but not for static analysis, which requires a little bit of knowledge. So the usual way we have to inject more knowledge about Cake PHP inside a static analysis engine is to use stubs. I don't know if you've ever run into those really weird repositories. There's a number of them. I'm going to provide you some URLs, but there are repositories full of frameworks which actually only have the definition. So you see the function name, the whole signature, it's just no code. It's like someone just gutted the whole framework and removed everything. Those are called stubs, because if you want to check the compatibility of a Cake PHP plugin with whatever version of Cake PHP you want to check it, then, well, you need to include the code of it. Now, if your plugin is like 25 files, but then you also have to include 700 PHP files for Cake, that's going to be a really long analysis that will include, well, of course, the whole Cake, which you're not really interested in. So stubs are these, this first step where we just decide to remove all the elements that are actually kind of unnecessary and just keep the part that is easy, and that will provide the definitions. So if you want to give it a try, I have to admit I haven't been able so far, except my own, to find stub for Cake, but there are generators and there are also libraries of stubs that are available. So you may take a look, and if you actually know an actual stub for Cake, I'm interested, because I don't know where it is. But anyway, the interesting part is that signature in general are really sufficient. Now, for the oldest of you, and I'm going to show my age with that, when we were writing PHP 4 code, well, we didn't have the classic and current, reflexes of writing well documentation, and the signature was really, really poor. The name of the parameters or the name of the function itself would not bear any meaning, or very little, like those acronyms, so you can't read it. The parameters, which were something that was used only inside the method, would be, again, completely meaningless. You don't know what it does. You don't know what it returns, if there are any special errors that will be emitted. So it's pretty light. Of course, fast forward 2022, and there is a lot more opportunities to do documentation directly through the signature. And basically, the function I've shown before is the one that you have here. So of course, we've improved in naming things. It is still one of those NP problems, extremely difficult, but we have that. Types are providing extra information. The name of the parameters are now important because, hey, we have named parameters, so it's probably better if they can actually help you understand what's there. There are attributes. We still have a bunch of things that are not available, like the actual meaning of the method, but that's going to be something else. That's going to be for the documentation. That's going to be for human level of abstraction. But the signature now is an excellent level of summary. If you don't want to include the whole framework and use it to check how a plugin is compatible, then signature level is exactly what we need. So in the end, the current stubs that was used so far, they provide a good level of description. They do ride on the current trend of adding more and more information, machine readable information directly at the signature level. But in the same time, they tend to lack updates. It's difficult to compare the two different stubs, one with the other, and history in general. So seeing the evolution of them, and they also lack the fact that they are not machine readable. So they're good for us. We can read lots of stuff, but stubs are not convenient to manipulate. If you want to use them for anything else than static analysis, you probably need to do the parsing itself. So, I'm an author of a static analysis engine. So, well, it's okay. I can do that for myself again. But if you want to take advantage of that, and there will be opportunities, then you need to do something else. So I've hidden the name so far, but that's going to be the moment I can introduce the PDFF format, which is going to take over from the stubs and try to present something that is both a summary and a convenient way to manipulate this summary of Cake PHP as a framework. So PDFF, it's the acronym for PHP document file format. I tried to be really clever and do just like we did for FAR. So FAR is PHP archive repository, then it's just a jar with the PH instead of a G. But then here it's just end up with PDFF. That's kind of fun. It just replaces the stub files by being a JSON file format. Okay, so now this time it's going to be very simple to process. It's very simple to cover in terms of, decode. And inside, well, we've got the freedom to put data in a structured way. That's going to be a really big tree. We're going to cover that in a short moment, but that's just going to be a really big tree, very leafy tree. But at the same time, it's very simple. There's no need to detail all the levels. You're going to understand that pretty easily. And also now, just like for stubs, it's cache data. I can provide a JSON file and then reuse it everywhere I need. So before we actually move on to applications and to actual compatibility checking, let's take a look at the PDFF inside. It's going to be 3 megabytes long if I use the Cake PHP one, so I'm not going to bore you to death, but you're going to recognize the elements and be able to navigate the concept very easily. Here at the bottom, at the top, sorry, well, of course, we have versions. We could use it for all the different versions. So far, I realized that most versions can be, reduced to the middle version, not the minor version. So we don't have, every minor version available, but halfway is good enough. Below the version, you get, of course, the namespaces, and below the namespaces, you get all the arrays with the different structure that are inside, plus extra information such as names or options. We're going to see a few of them later. So let's go inside. Namespaces, they are all in there. We take one as an example for Cake data source. You have to remember that the namespaces, that's actually something that usually a little bit of a cliche, but the namespaces are all completely different for PHP. It looks like they are some kind of nested folders because that's usually the way we store them. But for PHP, it doesn't really care. It's just two different things. And if you've got namespace ABC, then the namespace AB is completely unrelated to ABC because those are two different prefixes. Here, this is the case. We see the different elements inside. And if we go below, for example, the classes, we're going to get, again, the name of the class as an index, and then all the details and the options. So I mentioned a few of them before, but abstract, final, read-only, they are here presented as a Boolean. In the code, so I would say in the stub version, that would be slightly different. If you don't need abstract, well, as developers, we are lazy, so just don't put it. Here inside the stub, well, we need to know if this was detected or not. If it was detected, then we know it's false. If it's not detected, if it's detected, it's true. If it's not detected, it's false. If it's not there, well, something was wrong while we generate the file. So this is a safeguard. You may also note that, for example, there is read-only at the class level, and there I will actually need to make you look in the future. This is going to be a PHP 8.2 feature. So if you're already on 8.1, then you know read-only for properties, but then for 8 for the classes, that's upcoming. So the version of the PDFF so far is trying to take as many features as possible, including the one that are coming in a short moment. You can actually see that the property also has the read-only. They have some special elements also in the property, and I find it interesting to notice when we build this file. For example, there is the init value. So when you have a property, of course, there is a first value. And if you think a little bit about it, there are two different things that you never think about when you write the code. First, it could be an expression. There is something in PHP that's constant static expressions that is processed when you need the actual value. So we could actually end up not only to have a value, but a whole addition or something even more complex. And then every single value, including the null value, which is not a value. I had a whole article on that, 3 nothings in PHP recently. But if we have all of them, then we also need to know if there is a value or not. So that's how you end up with 3 elements to describe the default value of properties. But moving on, methods. Well, method, I say it's a leafy tree, so that's going to be 2 extra levels of details. We have, of course, the name, all the usual options, and then there is total parameters, variedit, which are like special cached values. And then we start again with the parameters, which include again more details. And that's always lots and lots of information. To give you an idea, Cake itself is 3 megabytes. So when you use the compressed JSON, 3 megabytes of file, it's not too big. The largest ones so far go up to 20 megabytes. So still reasonable to be able to manipulate that. Now, done with that, we're not going to read all the lines one after each other. What are the dependencies we can describe with such a format? Well, we said we want to describe Cake because that's a compatibility checker. Any kind of framework in general, that's good. But by extension, there are 2 others that are covered, which are, of course, composer packages. We have a name, we have a version, so we can actually create something that describes that. So it doesn't have to be a whole framework and be gigantic. It can be, a few kilobytes of description for a few classes. It might also be a plugin of Cake, and I've not found too many of them like that, but there could be, plugins that have dependencies on other plugins. It's a little bit surprising, but yeah, it's not just a composer package. You need to do an extra step. The other side of dependencies that you may have are, of course, things that are completely inside PHP. PHP itself can be described with the same level of detail as a PDFF. It's just that we're not going to scan the code itself. We're going to scan the reflection API and ask everything inside the code and check the same information. I have to admit that it's getting more and more pleasant to use that. The reflection API has been improving a lot recently. The internal API also is getting lots of details. So it's really convenient to be able to extract those, including the pickle. And pickle in general do not have much documentation. And that's nice to at least be able to extract the information. So when we're online, so I can suggest you, if you want to get your hand dirty on this file, the PDFF for Cakes are available. You can go on Exacats at GitHub. There's a PDFF repository. Look a little bit, and you will going to find Cake PHP with the different major versions. I didn't go below 3.9. If it's really useful, then we might. I don't know. We can see that later. But anyway, that can be something you can download and see. On the other hand, we're going to, of course, take a look at what we can do in terms of application and go toward the compatibility checker. So let's get this one out of the way immediately. Of course, this is a tool, a format that was made for static analysis. So it's extremely convenient for static analysis. Here you've got, I think it's a Cake plugin. And of course, what you end up is recognizing a good number of functions that Cake provides that are default staple of any plugin. __d, h, collection, and of course you know those. But then there are 426 which are false positive because of course our plugin is using Cake, so we have dependency on those. And if you add the PDFF, then they are now defined. We don't know exactly what they do, but at least they're not undefined because they come with the framework and we have now 0 undefined. Sometimes once you remove those, of course, you will end up with a few undefined functions, which are either a real problem, something that was not defined, or a dependency on another plugin. So I mentioned that a little earlier. By extension, we can also use this description file to do a number of other verifications, which are not always easy to do without having intimate knowledge of a framework. So checking the number of arguments, their names, if it's a variadic, if it's static or not. Well, all of that is now described, and the signature is sufficient. I estimate that there's at least 300 different specific analyses that could be done based on the full description of Cake and whatever plugin you have there. And that's exactly what we're checking. Now moving on, and of course, besides doing checks on bugs and things that apparently should not work, the first level we can do when we do migration and compatibility is documenting the version. So as I mentioned, it's easier to compare different versions of Cake nowadays. And if you don't have such a tool to do the comparison, then you can actually go to the documentation from Cake, which sports a guide for every version since 4. I don't think it goes too far back in the 3's version. But here, with 2 different versions, we can actually compare them. And it's very easy to say, okay, I take the 3.9 and the 4.4, and I try to look at the list of namespaces. And then I have basically 3 groups: the one that are added between 3.9 and 4.4, the one that were removed, because I can compare that, that's in the new version, but not in the previous one. And in between, I have the last one, which are common from 3.9 to 4.4, because we have to mention that, but Cake is taking care of, backward compatibility. And then now this is already information. I can see new namespaces appearing and the one disappearing. So that's an interesting piece of information. For the one that are, common of the 2 versions, well, it's pretty simple. I can do the same, but I have to go first deep and then try again the comparison. So I can go inside every single namespace and apply the same strategy. I say, hey, look, there are classes. Which are the ones that are common? Which are the ones that were added? The one that were removed? And then I already have a bunch of information. So you can see it on a little GUI that has been created for that specific purpose. You can imagine, of course, that from 3.9 to 4.4, well, there's a lot of evolution, including a major version. So there will be things that disappears and things that are added. But you can now check and know exactly which one were added, which one were removed. And there's a controller factory that was not existing, apparently has been created. And there is, for example, a class UREI that was added. No, that was removed. I kind of suspect it has been moved somewhere else. Again, once we have the class, we can go down to the methods. Inside the method, we can check the parameters. Inside the parameters, we can go to default values and whatever options are there. So again, that's going to be, as I said, a very leafy tree. But we've got now all the details, and we can just ask them for any versions to prepare the documentation, to prepare the migration. So the compatibility can start with documenting. Now, documenting is a little dry like that, because of course we don't have actual presentation or why or more generic, information, more abstract level information. But it's good for machine. Machine is going to be very happy to have all those exact details, and we're going to see them coming back later. In fact, one of the elements that is missing with this approach is considering, for example, the classes that have been just renamed, or the classes methods, let's say, whose behavior changed. So we can actually look at the API and say, oh, the signature are the same, but if inside the block, the body of the function, the code has changed and there's a new behavior, well, we can't go further than that. The other one that I said here is renaming. So the class has changed name, maybe the namespace has changed name too. And so far the signature is not going to be sufficient to say, hey, look, this was a class named A in this B namespace. It has been moved to the Z namespace and it has another name. No, we need something more than that. Thankfully for us, so far the Cake migration guide is helping you with that. So that's a good thing. But we're going to see a little later details of how we can actually improve this automated process and solve that problem. Still, while we're there, the first usage of this big tree that we've seen is, well, doing just stats. And here you can see the evolution of the number of namespaces, functions, interface elements from 3.9 to 5. Just a side note, yes, I know 3.10 is before 3.9, and yes, the sort of PHP is not adapted to that. I'm just discovering that myself. Anyway, we can see the classic evolution. The different versions are usually adding things. You can see the enums, which are not available until Cake 4.4, but there will be some of them in Cake 5. Interesting. There are traits that are disappearing apparently. Don't know exactly why, but at least they are going down. It's a classic when there is a major version evolution. Usually the classes or whatever structure gets piled up, being obsolete, and then they just get removed for a major version. So that's the process we see here. And just like we had for renaming the methods and classes, it would be nice to be able to detect those deprecated classes without relying on reading actual manual. We're going to add that to the list. Another list of stats, because they could not be fit together in the previous one, is just the number of classes and constants. Here, constants is the number of constants, global constants and class constants. It's interesting, I think, to see as an evolution. Cake is about 500 classes. It's a pretty sizable framework indeed. So let's move on. And now that we have the detail of every structure that is available per version for Cake, then we can actually dive into details and check our plugin. So here we have one plugin. I took the debug kit. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with this kit. It's been around for a while, and we have the full panorama of the compatibility. So so far it's the function detail. So you again find the name of functions on the side. There is a usage level, which I think is an interesting piece of stats, because it means that if someone decides to change __d to something else, hopefully, crossing fingers, no one wants to do that, there will be 136 calls to change. So of course, if it's using Rector, that's going to be automated. That's easy, but in the same time, yeah, maybe we should not move for that reason that name. So we have an idea of how much the structure that have been defined by Cake are used in this plugin, and then we have a full list of every Cake version, and if this function is available in that version. So for function, I have to admit, yeah, it was a little easy. So everything is too okay. The only thing you could actually note is that there is Cake 5 mentioned here. The previous PDFF, well, Cake 5 is already workspace. It's being worked on. I think there's about 1,000 commits already in that branch. So there's a sizable amount of work that's there. And it's pretty easy to automate the checks and the extraction of all the structure from Cake 5 and check if your code is there and ready to use it. So yeah, we can already know that the current debug kit is already ready for Cake 5. No. So that's interesting information. If we move on, for example, for another compatibility check, this one at the classes level, and you have the list of classes on the left side, then again the usage, but this time this currency converter plugin is actually relying on a class called time, and apparently this class is not available yet. So either we need to prepare the code, or we can now take that to whoever is working on Cake 5 and say, hey, have you done that? What is the plan? Can you bring it back, or can we have something else to do it, or where is it going? But again, if we take this migration plugin in terms of we want to be ready when Cake 5 goes out, and we know exactly the only class that has to be updated. And so far, you've seen all the compatibilities broken down by version. I want to give you the full compatibility plugin by version, and this one is for every structures. So the previous two tables, we actually decided to compare that, to check that by structure. Here we decided to take all the different constants and put that together and see how we have compatibility. So element traits, there is no usage with this plugin, so we don't really know. That's okay. Interface functions, all of them are available through the different versions. That's possible. The strange result we have here is class. Now I have to say this plugin here, it's not mysterious. It's again the debug kit, and you have to understand that. The report here says, as a global, compatibility, the debug kit is not compatible with any of the versions for classes purposes. And why is it? If you take a look inside the code, then the classes, the debug kit is actually merging all the code from the different versions of Cake because it wants to be one repository working with all of them. So when we look at the code from a Cake 3.10 point of view, we suddenly realize that there are classes that are only available since 4. So we can't actually end up with a compatibility. And the same for Cake 4, when we look at all the classes lists and say, hey, what are the different incompatible or non-existing classes for 4, then we end up with the 3 ones which have disappeared. So the conclusion is, as a group, no, there's nothing we can do. We do not have a compatibility. It's probably a bad choice, but it's also, I would say, a superficial feedback that is not exactly the reality. If you prepare your plugin for one specific set of versions, each code, then you will probably get the green tick. If your plugin is actually available for multiple versions at the same time, then you're probably going to have some specific incompatibilities within the code. Kind of makes sense. Let's finish that and mention something about the code options. So we have mentioned code options. Sorry, is this notion that inside the code there are part of the code that is not really useful for execution, but are more useful, let's say, for code quality and for static analysis. Think about it like interfaces. Some of the interfaces might be used as templating. You just slap an interface on a class, and then the compiler will complain that such and such method is not available until you create them, and there you're good to go. But once you have this, hurdle passed, then the interface does not have any usage unless it's actually used, like in an instance of. Because actually for types, we could also remove the interface. The types, it could work. It's actually one option we could have to check fully the types and then make it still run in PHP. But that's a little bit advanced subject here. There are lots of other code options that are only used, for example, for dev purposes. I mean, if you have a final class, unless you're doing, dynamic creation, probably you can do whatever you want. You can remove that at execution. Assert is something you can actually remove by just writing off a directive. And don't start with attributes. But attributes are actually the place where we could add extra information directly inside the code, the plugin, Cake, whatever PHP code you're thinking, and mention information. Attribute calling deprecated would be easy to parse and would add an extra level of information in the compatibility checker to say, hey, look, you're using 6, 10, 12 classes that are actually deprecated. You should consider removing them or starting the evolution. You could also, document behavior change. Look, for this version, we have refactored that method. It might have changed. So let's be careful when you want to use that. Moved to could be the renaming purpose and say, oh, this was the old version. The new one that you should consider is in that class, this method, please start moving there. We actually started a documentation with Dave for having some special common, language extension that we can use and reuse. That would be nice, and that static analyzer can understand whatever framework they're using. So let's finish that. Plugin checker. This is an entirely automatic process that I've described you. We start from Cake PHP code, we can extract the different versions, and now we can apply that to every plugin to have an immediate and interesting feedback on how much compatible is the code. It relies on, scripts all over the place that may be just extracting the information and then running that on a static analysis engine. It means that we can keep up with whatever evolution we have of Cake, of PHP, and all the dependencies we have. We just need, to update the description, and that should be good. It also provides us an interesting upgrade in collaboration between the different, the framework and the plugin authors. Because the framework can now, grab all the plugins, grab the extract the usage of the API, and say, look, if I decide to rename __d, I'm going to have a riot. Let's do something else. On the other hand, the plugin can say, look, I can prepare for the upcoming version. That's in a month, 2 months, and as soon as the new Cake PHP appears, I am already running it well. The compatibility port I've shown you is not ready for prime time at the moment, but I am open for beta tests. So if you want to give it a try on your system, please ping me on Slack, and then we can start working on that together. And okay, I'm a little late. I'm going to be heckled by Amanda in a moment, but I'll get preparation. Thank you very much for being there. I'm going to look for the comments because I don't know where they are. They have disappeared, but I will find that.